So Jessica, hello.
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 I'm very happy to have you in Paris for your first panel in France about marketing on Twitter, because it's one of the trends of this year, and we have just a few days ago a very innovative campaign for Autolib in Paris for the launch of the free use of car in Paris using Twitter. So the idea today is to introduce the French audience. It's okay? Yeah. So the idea today is to address the audience, the way brand can interact with Twitter, and the way Twitter can, help brand to start a conversation with customers. So we met last June at Cannes Lions, and we had this idea to do this panel here today. So I think it's a great opportunity for brands, because Jessica will stay at the. Je vous le fais en français. Jessica va rester au cocktail après. Donc pour les marques qui veulent poser des questions directement à Twitter sur ces problématiques, ça peut être l'occasion juste après, lors du cocktail, juste après les Hub Awards, de poser vos questions directement sur les interactions marques et Twitter. Okay, just some feelings.
It's good. It's working.
C'est bon.
I think we're all set.
Okay, so just play.
Yep. Great.
That's it.
That'll work. Perfect.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. Thank you for hanging around. So probably one of the last sessions of the day. I appreciate it. So I'm going to talk you through sort of an overview of Twitter, a Twitter talk as we call it, about how to join the conversation, sharing some best practices and some of the things that we think are kind of coming next for Twitter. So first, just as a basic overview, Twitter is one of those things that's hard to categorize. But the way that we think about it internally, so we say that Twitter is about interests. So as you guys, many of you probably know, on Twitter you choose to follow different accounts. And we think that that social graph reveals really an information network beneath it, indicating what you're really interested about. This, for example, is showing some of the accounts that I follow. And from peeling these back, you can get a pretty good sense of the different things that I'm interested in. And this is important because it's the foundation for the term that we use internally quite a bit, which is this idea of an information graph, meaning we know what our users are interested in based on what they choose to follow. This is probably a review for most of you, but Twitter is also an asymmetric network, meaning in this case, Adam Bain, who's our VP of, our President of Revenue, may choose to follow certain accounts like Chelsea Football Club that don't necessarily follow him back, whereas other relationships might be mutual. And this is a unique feature of our product because it also gives us certain signals about the strength of given relationships and of particular influencers, given that someone, for example, might have many people following them, but they choose to follow fewer people, et cetera, et cetera. A few more basics. Twitter we consider to be the pulse of what's happening. So this is a slide taken from London, where I'm based, during the recent riots and after the fact, the riot cleanup. And so if you logged onto Twitter and did a search for riot cleanup, you would see this media gallery of all the images of what's actually happening at that given point in time. And Twitter, as you guys know, is a very large network made up of tweets. So when we were getting started, it took us just over 3 years to reach that first billion tweets, which now we're covering in under a week, just passing 200 million tweets a day. We have 100 million active users we recently announced, and are essentially a mobile service. Twitter actually began as an SMS product, and now we have apps on all the major handsets, have the majority of our active users also logging in on mobile, and a really significant amount of tweets actually coming from mobile. This is fitting given the previous conversations about Apple and Steve Jobs. One of the things that we're excited to have worked on this year is a partnership with Apple, which is going to build Twitter into the iOS natively. This is important because as the penetration of handsets continues to grow, the fact that Twitter can be a native part of the operating system means that a user just authenticates once, and then we'll be able to use Twitter throughout various applications. So as an example, in the case that you take a photo and you decide that you want to share it, tweet is one of the native options that will come up. And this will be true for application developers as well who might want to use Twitter in terms of the network to share various content. So now that we gave a little bit of an overview of Twitter for folks that aren't familiar, I wanted to share 4 or 5 tips about how to actually join the conversation and get a little bit more into specifics. Now, this is the first, and it's a little bit tactical, but I work with partners, and I find that in most cases it's helpful to just review this. And this first point is that Twitter and your brand should go hand in hand. And that means when you first sign up for Twitter, this means setting up your account in a way that builds your brand. And these are a couple examples. And this sounds pretty basic, but I think it's useful for folks who are just becoming more familiar with the product. And this means, in cases where it's appropriate, trying to verify your account, uploading a background image, using a photo, a location, organization name, everything you can to help establish your brand on Twitter. And then really importantly, one of the questions we get from partners, I'm sure maybe you guys are thinking this too, is how do we build our presence on Twitter? And what we recommend is linking your Twitter username and a hashtag absolutely everywhere you can, and considering it something to be inseparable from your brand identity. So this means if you represent an organization that, for example, has a website with a lot of traffic, maybe it has on-air commercials, or you're a broadcast media partner, or you have billboards or print ads, we recommend to partners the best way to build your presence on Twitter is to include your username and hashtag in absolutely every one of those places. This includes email footers and business cards. We have a whole set of resources on business.twitter.com where you can get more information on things like the Twitter buttons and Twitter for websites. And this is just an example. So this is from a Whole Foods store, and this idea of making the brand inseparable. This is visible to someone who's just walking by, where they tell you, see instant sales alerts, enter contests, follow answers, and get cooking. Follow us on Twitter. And this is the way to raise awareness about the fact that your brand is represented on Twitter. So a couple other tips I'm going to briefly go over on what we're seeing in terms of innovative uses of the product. Clearly, you guys were talking about online, but I just wanted to mention that considering this combination of online and offline, we think is really a compelling use of Twitter. So this slide is taken from the MTV Music Video Awards last year, and they pursued a very deep integration on stage. So if you were in the venue, you were actually seeing this live tweet count of number of people that were mentioning the MTV VMAs, and if you're watching at home, this was also being displayed. And then they had specific calls to action around whether or not you were rooting for, Lady Gaga to win an award, or Justin Bieber, or what would happen if the two of them met. And they actually incorporated this in venue. And as a result, the buzz that was generated on Twitter was significantly heightened because of that. Similarly, and this comes from just nearby in London. Actually, it's a little hard to read. But it says, "Tweet what's on Sky," and this is signage that sits up in the subway stations, and it's a campaign that Sky is pursuing, which is trying to raise awareness of the fact that you can tweet what's on Sky, and Sky will reply back with customized recommendations for what to watch that evening. And lastly, this example comes from also from London. It's something we worked with the London 2012 Planning Committee on, which is that they wanted to create awareness for the fact that it was 1 year to go before the Olympics. I'm sure for many of you who are involved in digital strategy for various brands, at given points in time, you want to create buzz around a really specific initiative. And so what we always tell partners is find a way to get that hashtag in front of as many people as possible. And so in this case, they had that 1 year to go hashtag in Trafalgar Square. They were tweeting about it from all the various influentials associated with the Olympics. They had it on the BT Tower and across various other offline physical real estate. And as a result, they produced a globally trending topic around 1 year to go. And the reason I mention this example is that hashtag 1 year to go, that's not something people would just naturally think to mention. The fact that they had a globally trending topic, which just means an enormous volume of tweets, was completely influenced by the fact that they did things like this in terms of putting it in front of people. And one of the things we work with our partners on is to actually measure what this traffic looks like. So this is showing the amount of volume, the number of mentions of various terms related to the Olympics, including 1 year to go. And these black lines mark off this 24-hour period when our partner was really trying to push that conversation. And you can see this enormous spike. The number one tip we give to partners is find a way to get that hashtag on air. And if you look here, that corresponds exactly to when a live broadcast from the BBC included the 1 year to go on air. So these are just some various tips and insights into what we're seeing our partners do to bridge this online-offline experience to promote conversation on Twitter. The next is what's going on with Twitter and TV. That's sort of what the color is supposed to represent. And I'm going to show you a very quick video that gives an overview of what we're seeing happen with Twitter and TV, including the use of hashtags on air, @usernames, curating tweets, and live tweeting. Just 1 second. And this is accessible from media.twitter.com if you ever want to reference this stuff.
They come in lots. Not so much since Christmas or since the announcement of the engagement, but they come busy. Kate would be in every week.
Guys, it's time for late night hashtags. Here we go. I'm just going to stay home and watch The Bachelor and try to find all the chicks that get kicked off on Facebook.
We want to start a trending topic on Twitter, so use the hashtag #IfBieberMetGaga. Be funny, be creative, and send in your tweets because we're going to get to those later on tonight.
I want to thank Steve Carell, my co-star. Steve, you're a prince among men. You make it easy to improvise.
All right, now we got a trending topic for everybody following us on Twitter. It's Are You For Real? Hit us up, twitter.com/106park, and put Are You For Real in your tweet.
Change, says AARP, means that the homeowner has to pay much more than they thought they signed up for.
Be sure you follow me on Twitter so we can live chat during the shows.
Shows are getting the most tweets in real time, anytime.
Meg Whitman has some explaining to do on illegal immigrant housekeeper. This was a story that knocked this race off the path.
Of all of the Egypt-related tweets,
your Twitter follower count's been going through the roof as people have been streaming on to try and read your reports here.
I know we'll get there. I know we will.
Have something you want to say? Say it live. Tweet with fellow In Idiot Abroad fans this Friday from 8 to 11.
Join Jeff Probst at Jeff Probst, tweeting live right now and throughout tonight's Survivor episode. Or go to cbs.com/Jeff Probst.
In his book, The Comedians, set in the Papa Doc era Haiti of the 60s, Graham Greene's ambivalent hero describes the Trianon Hotel he's returning to.
And so that's a quick overview of one of these other major trends alongside this combination of online and offline is what we see going on right now with Twitter and TV. The third thing I'm going to mention briefly is this idea of putting things out on Twitter first. And again, these are all best practices that we recommend to our partners who are looking to best leverage Twitter. And so this comes from an example out of London just 2 weeks ago. So during London Fashion Week, as many of you know, it's a much anticipated event to see what the brands are going to unveil. And the first time they hit the runway is when those looks are unveiled. So what we did was working with partners. One, we made sure everyone was using a consistent hashtag like we've talked about. And Burberry had the idea of what if we put these looks up on Twitter before they hit the runway? And in the fashion community, this was widely covered by tons of consumer press because the anticipation of seeing the The new lines go down the runway is what it's all about. And for the first time, people who couldn't be in the audience actually were able to see each of these before the people who were. And as a result, they generated, I think, 10 times the normal number of brand mentions on Twitter and created sort of a case study within the industry to really be a thought leader and an industry leader. And this particular image comes from the media galleries that are now available on Twitter, something we recently launched. Second, we've seen some of our partners do this also for commercial activity. So in this case, Super 8 was a movie that was premiering in the States, and it was supposed to come out on a Friday night, and they had forecasts of what they thought they would do in revenue over that weekend. And they decided Thursday, a day early, they were going to give a Super 8 secret sneak preview to their Twitter followers. And the interesting thing about this, see that link to get tickets? These weren't free, they weren't even discounted, they were full price tickets, but they were just special because it was the first chance to see the movie, and you sort of felt like their Twitter followers got access to something they wouldn't have otherwise. They ended up doing an extra $1 million in sales just from that Thursday night and blew past their estimates of what they thought they were going to do throughout the weekend, which they credit to this buzz and conversation that resulted from the sneak peek given to the influencers. And the last thing I'm going to mention that we're seeing happen on the platform that we also recommend to partners is this idea of programming. And so this just means taking a step back and trying to brainstorm a little bit about, in addition to using Twitter regularly to communicate with followers and give an audience, could you actually program, for example, for an hour, something that you're going to do on Twitter? And this is what we're now seeing many of our partners do. So this comes actually from today. So in the UK, where I'm based, we worked with a bunch of partners to say, hey, what if we suggested that you sit down for 1 hour and answer questions on Twitter? Sort of like, a little bit like a press interview, but you're going to take questions from anyone, anywhere in the world, and you can choose which ones you want to answer. So earlier today, William Hague did just that, and he tweeted the hashtag AskFS for the Foreign Secretary, and over the past few days gathered questions, and then today at noon he sat down and answered many of them over the course of that hour. We've seen this across television as well. So Oprah Live Tweet is something that Oprah and her team started doing, which was that when the show was airing in the United States, I think it was a Sunday evening, her team would sit down and they would say, all right, it's time for hashtag Oprah Live Tweet. So if you're watching at home the television show at Oprah, at the same time you're watching Twitter and you're seeing Oprah comment on Twitter about what you're watching on television. And we just think this is a really compelling use case that many of our partners are now adopting. A couple others, we worked with Richard Branson. Actually, on Monday, he did the same thing. He sat down for a live Q&A, Ask Richard, where for 30 minutes he just responded to people's questions to give them that sense of direct access, to be accessible, and to actually just program so you could essentially tune in to follow along. And this is the last example here. This comes from a White House initiative, which you can see here, Ask Michelle, a campaign where the First Lady is going to respond to these questions on Twitter. So that's a quick overview of the basics of Twitter, our recommendations for building your brand, how to leverage both online, quite obviously, but also offline, some of what we think is happening now with Twitter and TV, and what's coming next with programming. So thank you for the time, and that's it.
Thank you very much. So